Hey, party people. Welcome once again to the Party of One podcast, the actual play RPG podcast where the gaming table is always set for two. I'm your host as always, Jeff Stormer, and this week on the show, I am joined by Dylan from Kill Every Monster for a game of Exquisite Biome. Party people, we are back. We took a couple weeks off for our summer vacation, and we are back with new episodes, and this is a very special season premiere. This is the first in a two-part crossover with our friends over at Kill Every Monster, which is a Dungeons & Dragons discussion podcast examining the lore around various monsters, what works, what doesn't, and how people can build monsters that properly evoke the mythology and lore around those creatures and tell more evocative stories in this space. I really love this podcast. It's genuinely one of my favorite role-playing game podcasts out there. And what's cool about it is it's really a podcast in two parts. The first part of every episode is Dylan, our friend of the show, Aram, and a guest sitting down and the three of them talking through what makes a monster interesting, the mythologies that monster comes from, the sort of heritage that the game is pulling from, and then how you can reimagine it, how D&D as a game sort of fails a lot of these mythologies, and how you can use these things really properly in play. And then the second half is a fully realized cinematic actual play with sound effects, music, scoring that allows players to sort of see these monsters in action as they are sort of realized in the discussion part. And so I knew I wanted to do a crossover with Kill Every Monster. I knew I wanted it to be really special, and what we landed on was recreating that experience over two separate Party of One episodes. What you're going to hear in this episode is Dylan and I sitting down to play the game Exquisite Biome to create a monster and create the world of that monster. And then in our second episode, I take a ROM through an Ironsworn scenario to encounter that monster firsthand to create the full Kill Every Monster experience. That episode, Ironsworn with Aram Varshan, the second half of our Party of One Kills Every Monster crossover, drops on the main feed tomorrow, September 21st, or if you want to hear it right now, you can go to patreon.com/JeffStormer and check out the early access for the episode. Finally, one other thing to shout out before we talk about the game that we're playing this week. I recently guested on Kill Every Monster. It actually dropped just a few days ago at the time of this recording. I talked about Modrons, which are sort of geometric living shapes from the plane of ultimate law. It's a very weird monster. It's a very fun episode and conversation where I kind of let loose my true feelings about the game Dungeons & Dragons a little bit. You can find a link to that episode in the show notes as well. Now, let's talk about the game that we're playing this week. Exquisite Biome, written by beloved friend of the show, Kara Assertion, is a game about the symbiosis of the natural world. In it, you create an ecosystem, you populate it with strange and wondrous animals, and you see how they interact with one another. It is this wonderful, cool, world-building, journaling game that just makes weird little creatures, and then you play out how these creatures interact with one another. It has some really clever card mechanics that we get into in the episode. This game rules. I love this game. You can hear us play it several times on All My Fantasy Children, which I will link in the show notes. It's a game I really enjoy. I think you should absolutely go check it out. You can find more information about Exquisite Biome in the show notes. And with all that said, let's go ahead and throw it over to me in the past so that he can get started with the show. Take it past me. Thanks, future me. This week I am sitting down with Dylan. Dylan, thank you so much for coming on Party of One.
Hi, Jeff. I'm so fucking excited to be here. Can I say the fuck word?
I am so absolutely stoked. This is going to be such a good episode. It's such a good game. I've been really looking forward to this all day. But at the top of the episode, before we get into today's shenanigans, why don't you let our lovely listeners at home know about anything you've got going on that you might want them to know about?
I mostly do one thing. I am one of the co-hosts of the podcast Kill Every Monster, a show where we wander through the 5th edition monster manual, just kind of taking stock of the monsters we're given, their mythology, their mechanics, how the two line up, and more often than not, how they don't, and how you can make them work better in your games. We take on a guest every episode. We let them pick their favorite monster. We talk about it, and then at the end of the episode, we do 45 minutes to an hour AP, where the guest gets to play their favorite monster and try to murder my co-host, Aram, who has it coming every time.
Every single time. It is remarkable how skilled Aram is at having it going.
I was fully expecting 40 episodes deep to start rerunning, okay, we've murdered this guy twice already. No, he comes up with a new asshole every single time. It's rather
Truly,
impressive.
it is a remarkable feat that every single time Aram shows up, like, here's a whole new variety of eminently murderable asshole. It's one of the reasons why I love Aram as a performer and a person, and it is a skill that I truly look up to, frankly, if I'm being 100% honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of why I sit and DM it every time. I don't have to make up characters. I just take the action figures and slam them together.
It's a good way to live. And so, speaking of taking some action figures, we're going to build an action figure. I'll explain a little bit about what we are doing here specifically because I am really excited about it. This is the first of a 2-part episode series where, speaking of taking an action figure and then throwing it at Aram and hoping that he dodges it, we are going to be
hoping he dodges it. We'll see.
We are today making up a monster using the game Exquisite Biome by friend of the show, Caro Assertion. And we are going to create a monster. We are going to flesh out the world that it lives in. We are going to get to know this strange new monster. And then I'm going to take this episode and I'm going to go find another game. And I am going to subject Aram to this monster in real time with no foreknowledge of what they are about to encounter. And I could not be more excited for either of these 2 episodes because this is going to be an incredibly fun experience from top to bottom.
I'm very excited to see what nonsense we come up with.
I'm so excited. So Exquisite Biome is a game about the natural world, is a game about the creatures that inhabit it, and it is a game about a fictitious biome. It is a game about speculative biology. It is an experience where we are going to draw some playing cards. We are going to lay them out in front of us, and we are going to, using those cards as prompts, we are going to flesh out an environment and the strange creatures that live in that environment. We are going to begin by kind of talking through not just safety things, but also general vibe checks of like the kind of world we want to create, the kind of thing that we want to discover. We're going to, plant some seeds, and then we're going to draw cards to watch those seeds grow into a strange and monstrous tree. So, any beyond, I think the standard things that I feel like we both know are not going to come up. Are there any specific lines or veils that might come up within this game that you would like to put on the table?
No, I'm trying to also think if we're going to subject Aram to this, if he's got any particular heebie-jeebies around animals. Also
a good point, and I will check in with Aram and make sure, but in the meantime,
I'm good. I like animals in general. I think the only time animals bother me is when they touch me and it surprises me. That is the scariest place to find a spider, is directly on you. Otherwise,
that is fair. I do want to put a line on like burrowing insects. It's a thing that I do not want to come up.
No, that's respectable.
Otherwise, I think I am good, and I think that we can kind of start like fleshing things out.
Fantastic.
Do you have any sort of world pick? Like, what pops into your head? What kind of world or setting or tone, or like what are sort of the big vibe notes that you want to put into our world creature today?
So here's the question: is we don't know necessarily what game we're going to parlay this one into in the future.
Correct.
But do you have a vague setting in mind for that? Do we know if we're going to go like a distant future and this is the thing living out in the wastelands? Are we doing some high fantasy wander through the woods? This monster pops out instead of bandits.
I've been kind of feeling a high fantasy vibe. It's been a while since I've really gotten to play around in that space, and I think that is something about like finding a horrifying thing in the woods or out of the way is kind of an energy that I'm excited to play around with.
And do we want to assume this is something that we're going to run into like near to people, like off the path, not necessarily in the woods, but like I said, we're looking at a random encounter.
Right. Yeah. I am thinking where I want, if I'm thinking about this in gamified terms, which is genuinely helpful for me in this kind of a context, I think that the vibe that I want to create and I want to lean into is boss monster a little bit.
Yes.
I want to kind of be able to like point to this thing. So I think I want whatever its natural environment to be to feel like a lair, if that makes sense. Like I want this to be the thing that you find at the climax of the story, and everything around it is leading up to the confrontation with this thing.
And do you want to assume we're doing basically the woods at the foot of the mountain, where you always have to worry about that thing coming down?
That feels good. I like that a lot. We're going to kind of pull up some specific environmental notes in a moment, but like that energy of this thing could emerge is compelling to me. That is very compelling to me.
That feeling of the worst thing that could happen is there's bears, and bears are more afraid of you than you are of them. And then something comes along, picks up the bear in its talons and flies away, and you realize, oh,
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. I think that we're on exactly the same vibe. All right. So then with that, we've kind of mapped out a little bit. We're on the same page. It's time to start by mapping out like where we're going to find this thing. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to draw 2 cards. I have a deck of playing cards in front of me. I'm going to show these to you, Dylan, because I think they're fun, and I absolutely will be. If a vibe comes from them, like I'm going to lean into it. I have this deck of like public domain comic book art cards.
Fantastic.
That like I don't know if there's going to be a vibe that comes from it, because like that might not be a thing, but it's the deck of cards that I'm working with, and if inspiration strikes, inspiration strikes. So we are going to draw 2 cards off of this deck, and that is going to tell us a little bit about when and where we find this particular creature. All right, so our 2 cards that we're looking at are, first off, we have the 2 of hearts. A 2 represents an environmental focus of a tundra or wasteland, which is very, very exciting. And the hearts is, now, Dylan, I kind of want to talk this through with you.
Yes.
Because I think that this is a very fun combination.
Mm-hmm.
What does a warm and wet tundra or wasteland evoke to you?
So, warm and wet tundra, by definition, doesn't work.
That's right. That's where my head is at.
A tundra is, as far as I'm aware, a type of desert, and you can't really do wet deserts. It's sort of how they are. Also, warm and tundra don't mix.
The ice, yeah. That's why this combination is fascinating to me.
So one thing that comes up every now and then is the idea that, like, so if you're playing in fantasy, if you're doing a Dungeon and Dragon, if you're finding a path of some sort,
sure,
and they're highly powerful wizards, wastelands should be plentiful.
Right.
And the thing about wastelands in that context is they don't have to look like blasted out deserts. Like, this could be, honestly, a kind of just broken forest where a wizard blew up their own tower one day. And this is now just like, we don't go there. Things don't grow there. You can plant things there. They don't sprout. The trees haven't died yet, because the trees will never die. They also haven't aged or grown since that happened.
So what like pairing off of that visual, which is so evocative, and the card keys, the thing I get is that this is a wasteland of like, almost, if you imagine like a forest that has been blasted with a gigantic amount of like liquid nitrogen or like fire extinguisher foam.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the vibe that I get, where things have those sort of like frost burns on them, and things are sort of like semi-crystalline and like shattering. And
I really like
everything has this sort of like frostbitten look to it.
Okay. I can definitely see that working. I'm very curious what we'll see how this goes.
Our other environmental detail is the 7 of diamonds, which means that we find ourselves in the midday. And the detail that I want you to kind of expound on a little bit and think about, how do strong winds factor into the place that we have described?
Now, I accidentally said a thing in my rambling previously that I kind of latched onto, which is that idea of something being almost temporally frozen.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think the time of day is frozen. I think we still get that diurnal cycle. But maybe that strong wind is just the explosion has not stopped. Just
That's
there's
really
an
cool.
epicenter, and that shock wave is just still going. So you're still dealing with like not birds can't fly wind, but like put some effort into moving forward levels of wind constantly in one direction.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
In addition to all your frostbite, you're crystallizing. All of the trees are now growing at like a fucking 75-degree angle
That's
permanently.
so cool. Yeah, everything is the idea that everything is growing away from this theoretical blast site is super fascinating. And the idea that like as you approach it, yeah, you're going to see like and this idea that like to your comment earlier about like wastelands don't have to look ruined and like lifeless. I love the idea that like this is waste, but it is also like as you are walking, it doesn't like this whatever this explosion didn't remove the life from the area, so you have this sort of bizarre things look like they are flying away from an explosion that is constantly blowing wind and dust and crystalline bits at you.
This is a place where nature itself seems like it's afraid of something.
Yes, yes,
Generally
yes.
speaking, nature is right.
I love that. I love that a lot. And now let's find out what nature is afraid of. Because I have 3 cards in front of us. I am going to lay them in front of me, and I'm going to flip them one at a time. This is going to give us the individual detail. This is going to give us the individual details of what our creature is. There's 2 ways that we can do this. We can flip them one at a time and kind of flesh things out one piece at a time, or we can look at all 3 of the cards, find out what the prompts are, and then kind of like build it out from there. Which would you prefer to do?
Now, were this me playing at home completely, just doing the thing, I would flip over all 3. But we have to acknowledge our medium, Jeff.
That's a good point.
There's so much drama in doing one at a time.
We've got to evoke the drama. So,
got to do it for the people.
Our first card, and this is going to give us a general description of our creature. The taxonomy of the card, the suit of the card is going to give us our like the general species or style, or I guess taxonomy of the creature. And the number of the card is going to give us the ecological niche of the creature. So these are going to combine to give us the general vibe of what we're describing. So I have drawn the 5 of hearts.
Okay.
Very interesting in that these are directly diametrically opposed things as I look at what I have here.
Insect
Hearts.
Foraging mammal.
Hearts is a mammal, which is rodents, big cats, ungulates, marsupials. And 5 is an insect forager. Does that mean that it's foraging for insects? Does that mean that it is an insectoid mammalian hybrid? What pops into your head when you read mammal and insect forager?
Unfortunately, I'm going to give you a very boring answer here. Anteaters.
Anteaters are not at all a boring answer because let me tell you a little bit of Jeff lore.
Good.
I grew up playing I grew up playing the Dragon Quest video games, and there was an anteater that was a monster in those video games that haunted me. These things were the bane of my existence. And so like I have a visceral response to anteaters in particular.
That is at once very cartoony while also being completely unpleasant.
Right?
It feels like it should be in a children's storybook. Like, the Paper Bag Princess?
Oh, yeah.
Even the art style to me feels like you could drop this little bastard in there, but I would hate it.
Well, I learned this in adulthood that the primary artist for the Dragon Quest video games was Akira Toriyama, who was also at the same time making Dragon Ball, and these things look like Dragon Ball. These things look like a monster that shows up in the background of a Dragon Ball, and I love them with all my heart.
It's there.
So, so we've got an anteater.
Let's do our second page, because my immediate temptation is going to be to lean into the anteater, but
let's sit with it. All right, we're going to build out a distinctive feature of our creature. Depending on the card, the way this works is if we draw a red card, we have one list of prompts. If we draw a black card, we have the other list of prompts. We have the 5 of clubs, which is a black card. Does it have horns, antlers, or both?
If you're foraging for insects, I gotta imagine you have some sort of horn, but I'm honestly leaning more like tusks, like something to dig out,
I
something to
kind of
pry
was,
shit open.
yeah, I could, and like if you are, if like, and what that tells me, and this is going to be, there is the option in this game that I absolutely would like to pull on at least once, if not twice, or a few times as needed. There is an option to like take the cards that we draw and use them as to start to build out like second and third monsters.
Yeah.
My brain immediately, and this is me putting a pin in this for later.
Mm-hmm.
That implies to me, if you have, because the detail that I latch onto is like antlers, and I'm kind of picturing like an antler head of mammoth tusks, where it is like I am ripping something open with the strength of a headbutt and like grabbing it and prying it. And what that tells me is that there are some pretty big goddamn insects like hiding in the magical wastes of this forest that are getting picked off by this gigantic anteater.
I'm also imagining, you mentioned like crystalline wastes, like trees that are a weird combination of frozen over and crystallized and frostbitten. Like getting into that is not trivial.
No, not at all. Now that you mention it, like, yeah, so so that's fascinating because that implies that like this is a creature that has, magically and naturally adapted to this environment, which tells me that also the originator of this is either a wizard who is dead, or like has this environment has been so thoroughly shaped by some presence that creatures such as this have like adapted to engage with it, which is fascinating.
That's, again, just to do the little sidetracks. It's one of my favorite parts that you get to do with fantasy is any disaster that happens in modern world, we can start to deal with it. It might be a slow recovery, but disasters are, in terms of history, instantaneous.
Yeah.
But if you, say, have a fight in the heavens and you cut the hand off of a god and that hand falls to earth and lands, that impact could take millennia.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's a god thing. Who knows how that works? It's big magic. Fuck off. I don't have to explain anything.
So we have our third card. This is going to determine the habits and personality of our creature. The suit of the card is going to determine its social groupings, and the environmental behavior is going to be determined by the number on the card. This card is the 6 of spades. So it has a distinct method of child rearing or reproduction. And as a spade, it is dozens, hundreds, or thousands of this species live together.
Hey.
Okay. Well, that is a great vision. All right. Thinking about the structure of these 2 episodes, I am very, very excited about. This is me. This is foreshadowing for both Dylan and the listener. The idea of showing one of these things and then the ground rumbles is very good.
Now, we talked about the anteater. That came up immediately. What if part of this whole thing is that they are not good burrowers themselves? They are just slightly larger than like these weird magically irradiated ants that it's going after. And part of this whole horn antler situation is just a way for the adult to hollow out the tunnels bigger so that it can just go in, kill a hive, and take it as its own. And that's now where it breeds.
That's really
like if you see an anthill, you need to be concerned because there is no promise that ants are what's coming out. You could get these spiky little fuzzy fucks.
Oh, and I like that. That immediately also tells me, and this will probably inform our our insect that I also want to get to know. Because what this tells me, because like what that tells me, and what the prompts that we got told me is, I'm thinking this operates on cockroach rules. The child rearing sense of like, it's if you see one, there are thousands direct, like you have to confront thousands. And the idea, and that also ties really nicely into the idea of like the antlers. If there is one, if there is one familial head, right? There's one head, there's one parent in charge, and they are the head burrower. They are the burrower.
Scrap the ants, go after termites, make it one of those things where they hollow out a tree.
Yeah.
And it's just, you might see one. It's a full adult size. It's the size of, I don't know, a moderately large dog or like a cat or something, like not necessarily imposing, but big. And the moment you see that, you look around at all of the trees that didn't seem like they were quite, like just almost a little blighted. Something's a little wrong with them. You notice the branches are shifting a little in directions that do not correspond with the wind. And you leave, lest the fucking tree rupture.
And the idea that like these being insect foragers is very good, because it presents the idea that if you are a person, or like if it's that very like, if you are the person in the wrong spot, well then now you are the insect. Like the idea that like once those trees start exploding, it is feeding time and something is going to get eaten.
Yeah, they are known for the insect foraging because their growth cycle, they start off so fucking small that they are hunting for nests.
Yeah.
We will throw the young into nests. They're big enough that they'll just devour it and it'll be fine. But if you see a hive, you see a termite mound, you see ants, they just start dropping children into it.
Yep, I really love that.
You see an adult, that is big enough to have real teeth. And meat is meat.
Meat is meat, and it will feed its family. All right, so our final action, our final piece of the puzzle, is we are going to create a scene. We're going to see a moment of nature in motion. I've drawn a card. We are going to collectively describe a scene. I've drawn a jack. We are going to describe a scene, like this is sort of a documentary experience. We are going to describe a scene of watching this animal, watching this creature that we've created. What's a good evocative name for this creature? Is it the horn burrower?
Yeah, I think that might be what we go with.
All right,
I'm honestly bad at names. That was a bad invite for something. We're gonna have to name three
that's
things.
Fine. I love naming shit, so I feel like this is this is a good combination. So the horn burrower, we're going to describe a scene of the horn burrower in a moment of pursuit or defense.
Okay, Jeff, let me tell you a story.
Tell me a story. Please tell me the story.
We're in a warm, wet season. We're early on in the summer. We're transitioning from spring.
The sun is high in the sky, like it is peak. It is the middle of the day.
Yeah. And all of the birds, like basically proportional to how far north you are, you're getting all of your birds coming back from the usual migration. Now, the thing about birds is they are very good at navigation, but they are not necessarily known for memorizing what lives somewhere. We follow a little woodpecker flying through the trees, just sort of settling somewhere and deciding, you know what? Far enough north. This will be good. This will be comfortable. The sun is warm. It's just baking on those feathers. All that's left is to dig myself a little nest, get some bugs, and it lands on a tree branch on one of these nice little off-kilter trees. And we immediately hear that little rat-a-tat-tat of the beak just slamming into a tree over and over again. And then there's the pause, a little bit of rustling from the wind, and it starts again. We do it again, and then the tree knocks back.
Oh, no.
That bird, like, does one or two little birdie hops back on the branch, kind of looks at it. And this time it comes back, and instead of a little rat-a-tat-tat, it's a little bit more of a scraping noise. The bird goes forward, does another little couple pecks, and a bone spike, a horn, jams through the bark, coming out the other direction. The bird hops back and immediately starts flying. And then that bone flexes and cracks. A little tuft of brown fur becomes visible on the outside of the bark. and it pushes a little harder. And this little, maybe like fist size, you imagine a gerbil if a gerbil grew almost like radial horns on its face, maybe an inch or so long. For a gerbil face, quite long. Just sort of stumbles out onto the branch into the bright noon light of day, possibly for the first time in its life, and just sort of looks around a little confused, goes to walk forward, slips, and just tumbles onto the forest floor. Again, gets up a little bit confused, just sort of starts meandering out into the woods. How do we like that for some form of defense?
I like that. I really, really like that. That's great. That's very good. Yeah, I like that. That rules. And so with that, now we are going to introduce our next creature into the scene. We've talked a little bit about this, so we've got some notes. And I think, and so what we're going to do is we've got 4 cards in front of us. We have the Jack, but we have in order the 5 of hearts, the 5 of clubs, the 6 of spades, and the Jack of hearts. So so what we do when we want to further explore is we are going to take our far left card, which is our Jack. Hold on, I have to remember myself the exact order that you draw in.
I think for this bit, we're doing just the 3.
Yes. And so,
so it's everything up to the Jack of hearts.
Oh, yeah. So, right. You are correct. So we take
the 5 of hearts, the 5 of clubs.
And then we're going to draw a new card for our 3rd card.
Yes.
Because what we are going to do now is we are going to use these 2 cards plus a new 3rd card to create another creature. This works out really nicely because the 6 of spades is Jeff, invertebrates.
The way this works, I'm going to call this out because I think this is a really cool design choice.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why they specifically do 3 is we're not drawing a new card. We're reordering the 3 we have. So each card applies to one of the other tables, and you keep rotating through like that.
That's really cool. I do really love this.
Were it not a really cool idea, like I said, that pick a 3, and that I wouldn't bother interrupting you, but I do kind of like that idea.
I appreciate it very much. Okay, so with that, we've got our 3 cards. We're taking our leftmost card. We're taking the last card that we drew, which is the 6 of spades. We move that. That becomes our first card, and then we go from there, which works out really nicely because that means that we have a spade, which is an insect, an invertebrate, which matches out perfectly because we said that we wanted to discover what horn burrowers were eating in this space. The 6 also works really well. I'm really, really happy with how this has worked out because that's a climber or tree dweller.
Now, Jeff, I'm going to, for this one, let you sort of take the reins a little bit more because we are talking about something that a horn burrower would hunt.
Yes.
And it's an insect. So we are now directly smack into burrowing insects.
Oh, I should specify when I say burrowing insects, I mean burrowing into flesh and skin and things. That is a thing that I cannot handle. So like this in general is perfectly okay with me.
Beautiful.
And the idea that, like we had said, that the horn burrower like digs into trees, into ant hills, into nests, and like digs into things with its horns to make space for its young, and then goes out and like feasts on things, brings that food back to its young, and does it in trees very specifically, and in these crystalline trees, tells me that the insects that lived in those crystalline trees are fascinating.
I know this is the wrong animal, but I did just get the image of like having hollowed out a tree, having, mama burrower dragging a corpse to just the bottom where the hole is so that the young can come down and just eat the carcass, come back up the tree.
That's great. Yep. I like that.
Going through the woods and just seeing a bunch of deer just resting half eaten up against tree stumps.
That's
immediately
terrifying.
Concerning.
Terrifying. Yeah, and like I think that if they are, I love the idea that this creature, this insect, is hides in trees, grabs things, drags them to the base of that tree, almost gives it the image of that the tree itself is grabbing you. And that I think I'm going to just immediately propose the name Tree Haunt. These are the Tree Haunt because they make it look like a tree is haunted.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's a trapdoor spider, except instead of the trapdoor, it's the entire fucking tree trying to eat a rabbit.
That rules. All right. So our second card becomes the 5 of clubs. The 5 of clubs it's got to be the 5 of hearts. I had these backwards.
Yes.
It is the 5 of hearts, which gives us our other 5 curious jaws, teeth, or tusks. Yes. Good. How many? What shape?
Oh, it's got to be like, you know, those weird little fish parasites that like get into a fish's mouth, eat the tongue, and then live in the place of the tongue.
The second little alien. Sure.
Yeah. What if we did that where like during the day, they retreat like up the tree, kind of live quiet and protected. But when they come down, it's long ass spindly legs, like still that needle thin, like spider leg. But it's basically a series of mandibles that emulate the trunk or the roots at the bottom of the trunk. So that if like a rabbit comes by, the roots essentially just these thin little bastards kind of come up, grab the thing, hold it against the mouth and the base of the tree. It just eats and then retreats.
I like that. I want to push that a note even further that I'm thinking about this. If it's hiding inside the tree and it's got these weird sort of spindly arm tusks that kind of come out and grab things, what if it's not like, what if it doesn't need to retreat because it's so large, it's just the inside of that tree?
Oh, the thing's not hollowing out the tree. Those long, weird antler things are like it getting its forehead down and just gutting an animal.
It's protrusions like a man o' war, right? Like it's just, it's a big body and it's got spindly arms that come out, grab shit, drag it in and devour it. So it's like Sarlacc pit style. The only thing you see are its grabby arms, but there's a whole goddamn thing inside of that tree stump.
See, I really like that because then the long ass horns on the horn burrower, like if it comes up to the roots of the tree and just jams that horn up, you're just taking an entire antler up the throat of a monster, rooting it around a little bit, and then leaving your baby to live inside the corpse.
That's terrifying.
Awful. It's
terrifying.
A bad day.
And it rules. It rules extremely hard. So our third creature card, our habits and personality, we have the 5 of clubs. The 5 of clubs. Hey Dylan, do you want to read the question for number 5 on this? Because I feel like it's pretty good.
Well, I mean, dwelling or nest, this creature makes its home of strange material. How does it use its environment?
What a wonderful prompt for us to land on. Yeah, that's sick.
I like that. One of those things where just like that crystalline nature, like these things are almost an eerie, semi-translucent blue.
Yes, it absolutely
is. If it were
is.
A regular ass tree, they'd never get away with it.
I love that. I love that a lot. Yeah, it is drawn to this kind of it is drawn to this kind of environment, and that is very, very good. The other thing that is frankly terrifying, is that this species lives in groups of a dozen or more, which means that this is. So we had said in the very beginning that the fascinating thing was that this forest was full of life for being a wasteland. That forest might be this thing.
That's exactly what I was imagining, is the idea of just a group of them coming in, and like the act of hollowing out a tree like this is time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where it asks how status is measured and judged. I don't know how it's judged, but how it is reflected is your key member gets first tree. So you could have a bunch of these long fucking disgusting fucking worms with all of these awful little mandibles just hanging out in a clearing while one of them hollows out a tree, and the remaining bits of the herd are effectively just tackling anything that comes into the clearing and trying to make sure that nothing interrupts that.
And so that plays really nicely with the card that I just drew for our nature in motion scene prompt. Here is Carla. She is a sweet baby.
Hello, Carla.
The scene prompt that I just drew, and also this answers a question that I was thinking about that ties in, that feels really nice. What you were describing, the idea that like one of these creatures burrows the tree and everything else starts just grabbing things to make sure it's uninterrupted. I drew the card, the prompt, and I'd love to paint you a scene for this because I think there's also a very big pitch that I want to throw in.
By all means.
The prompt is this is the 2 of spades, and this is for child rearing. And I think that like that process of like a creature, one of these things burrows the tree, and it is like part of the child rearing process, right? Like that is like it allows the collective entity to take root quite literally by burrowing out specifically these crystallized trees, where it is unique. These things are tree haunts are uniquely suited for these sorts of crystalline, liquid nitrogen blasted, magic rotted trees. And so what I think that we see that play out, right? We see this is, midday, and we see like as this we see specifically like this blasted forest, the trees are at an angle, everything has this coating of like artificial frost to it. And from the earth, but also from planes beyond, like there is a crackling in the ground and a crackling on the floor and a crackling in the surface of the world as this first tendril punches through this tree, and this creature like emerges and starts like punching through the base of this crystalline tree, and slowly other tree haunts appear and start like grabbing at plants and insect and like smaller insects and smaller mammals, and start grabbing things as it digs into this tree. And as it does that, the thing about these trees is they are blasted with magic, which means that they are themselves like crackling with a sort of crystalline energy, which means that these things are not just feasting on the things that they live in these trees for, and they're not just taking the form of this forest. They are taking the form of this forest because they also are feeding upon the magic that is in this space at this moment. And so they are quite literally like extra, and by virtue of crack, and the more of this energy like ripples out, the more of these tree haunts appear until it has taken the forest. So the child rearing process, the propagation process, the way that this forest turns into a tree haunt is it literally like cracks magic out of these wasteland plants. And so I think that there's even this idea that like this creature feeds on sites of like great magical waste off almost, or like off waste, and like absorbs that magic and propagates itself through like sucking in that magic and then consuming the residual magic out of any living thing that dares approach it.
I really like the idea that these are creatures that just in general are referred to as haunts. And you're right. Mm-hmm. They tend towards sites of high magic, but they aren't a problem most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
If a university goes wrong and a lab explodes and a bunch of these things show up, they're these weird sort of wriggly little bastards. They have no real defense mechanisms. They're trying to get in and consume the magical energy. You don't even need another sorcerer. You can get a janitor with a sword.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of them, please. This forest was just a perfect storm where an infestation could crop up, where they could basically sheathe themselves in those crystalline trees and just grow unchecked.
Yeah, that rules. And so I guess my final question, and this might be, Dylan, this might be a last minute game switch, because I'm not even sure if this is exactly, if we want to use Exquisite Biome for this, despite the fact that I love this game a lot.
It's a really cool game.
I kind of want to know who the wizard, like the sorcerer, the wizard, who the fucker is that like pressed their luck and fucked around and found out, and like what remnant of them is left. And I think that I have a proposal for you.
I am all ears.
I think adding to the joy and the ambition and the strangeness of this episode, which is that we are going to be using all of this as material in another game. I also have here a game that requires no explanation or no prep or anything that I feel comfortable dropping on you on the fly. I have here a game, Session Zero by Megan Cross, which is a deck of cards that has character creation prompts on them. And I would love if you would be all right with it to just draw a hand of these cards with the idea that we are crafting an ancient sorcerer or wizard that fucked around and found out, and some remnant of them is still here. Because I think that is the climax beat of the story that we are going to hand to Aram.
Perfect. I love this.
All right, I am going to draw 3 of these cards, and then if we need more, we can draw more.
Mm-hmm.
How many? I believe there are a certain number of suits. What are the numbers? There are, I believe, 4 suits. Yeah, there are 4 suits. So I'm going to draw 4 cards. Those 4 suits are happiness, character, bonds, and I believe sadness. The happiness, bonds, character, and sadness. So I'm going to draw 1 card of each. And we are going to find out what the remnant of this wizard who might long be dead and their place is only observed by magic consuming haunts.
This is also a very good call because we drew 2 5s, which means if we did this an extra round, we'd get another insect forager, and that's just crowding the niche.
That's crowding the niche. And I feel like we're at a point where I'm comfortable with. So again, peeling back the curtain, and so that you as my friend and frequent game master can appreciate this. To me, what all of this says is this is like a classical fantasy game. This might be an Ironsworn. This might be a similar kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
Aram has shown up in this place hunting some remnant of this ancient dead wizard, only to come head on with the realization that like the wizard is gone, and what has taken its place is these magic consuming entities that have grown so powerful that they are about to enact something horrifying unless stopped in this moment.
Do we, just to pitch things for ruining Aram's day, if the thing they feed on is magic, and this is something where like the blast has not ended, that wind is still going, has the tower in the middle, the wizard's tower, just been overgrown, and there is effectively just a queen living in it. One massive 100-foot tall tree.
Oh no. I don't like that. And
we don't know about that thing because no one gets that far. But God, if you do, those spindly little tentacles ain't so fucking spindly no more, bud.
Yeah. So that gives me 3 really good like beats. And I still want to know who this wizard was, but that give me 3 excellent character beats. One of showing up like going to the wizard tower, colliding with a stampede of horn burrowers, just as a like, oh god, this thing has some weird animals that have adapted to the environment. Then the beat of, oh god, now I have to confront, like now I'm confronted by these like increasingly powerful and consuming magical entities that are sucking the magic out of this space.
Especially because the smaller ones they're traps, right? Like,
yeah,
they're not necessarily big enough to eat a man.
Yeah,
but they'll grab your leg
and they'll drag you to a tree where there's a big scary thing waiting. And then after fighting 1 or 2 of these haunts, looking over to the tower and realizing, oh god, there's a gigantic tower in the middle of all of this that seems to be crackling with a specific kind of energy.
Done.
This rules. I'm so excited. This is great.
Record, I'm going to pitch, if the regular ones are haunts, the big motherfucker is a ghast.
Oh, a ghast is good.
And I think the word just feels related, even though it isn't.
And what that tells me, the thing that builds off of that for me is that like at that point you're not, and this is maybe sort of the big existential terror of it, is like at that point you're not draining the magic. Like at that scale, like it's a Katamari Damacy effect, right? Like that's not draining the scale of this forest. That's gonna punch a hole in the plane and start just unraveling things at a cosmic level if it's the size of a tower.
Even just if anyone noticed it, if anyone is aware of that, like the fear of that thing, it's Depending on your version of fantasy, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
get gods that are either fueled by belief or that exist on their own. And I prefer the former. But that means that you could wind up where, like, when it showed up and started eating, it was just eating the magic. And then people heard about these things and they were bigger and they were more and more of a problem. And now they were actually dangerous because these ones are protected by that crystalline shell. And that fear and that combination with the magic almost deifies the gas.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's its own generator.
Yeah. That's sick. That's great. I like that a lot. That's good. All right, you want to get to know a wizard?
Let's meet a dumb wizard who did too many magics.
Fucked around and found out. I have 4 prompts here, and I'm going to ask you which of these cards I should flip over first.
Okay.
Do you want to answer a question about character, about bonds, about happiness, or about sadness?
Let's start off with happiness.
All right,
let's figure out what this bastard's after.
You carry a lucky charm wherever you go. What is it? How did it become into your possession? And why was it lucky? What is the object that this wizard, that was centered to this wizard's quest, existence, presence? Like, what was this wizard's signature object?
What if it's just a decent sized shard of a shattered crystal ball?
Oh, I like that a lot. That's really good.
One of those, like, early days, it was a lesson that was supposed to be like looking forward in the future, and he saw something too big, it spooked him, knocks it over, and it was like, that could be a bad memory, but the conversation after, the teacher, the archmage that came over, went, like, he's trying to pick it up and he just kind of stops him, just like, the future is big, looking forward is always dangerous, you never know what you're going to see, divination is a dangerous subject. Not in the same way that evocation is. Fireballs are also dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, there is nothing you're going to see that you won't also experience. Responding with fear just means living with that fear the rest of your life. It just kind of like took that lesson, that idea of like the future is always going to be handleable. Whatever scary thing I see, I'm going to have to deal with anyway. So there is no point in fearing it. And he just carried around that maybe 3-inch shard of crystal, just a little reminder of the time he was afraid when he shouldn't have been.
So I flipped over our character card, and this is such a good follow-up beat to that, because it is more than anything. What is your greatest desire? What will you take to achieve it? And what would you give up to see it realized? I love the idea. Taking that divination is a scary thing. It is a dangerous thing. Like, there is no true knowing the future. You will experience it one day. Just because you take that and you accept it and you acknowledge it, that doesn't necessarily mean that's not necessarily a good thing. Especially if you were someone that was already kind of pushing to know the future. Like, one of the most, I think, like, understandable impulses of, like, I want to know the future is because, like, I am afraid. I am afraid of what the future will hold. And so, like, it's that even though I have accepted that I cannot know the future and that, like, what will come regardless of, like, if I know it, doesn't change that fundamental fear of, but that something could be really bad. And so if this was if this is a Avengers Tony Stark, Iron Man 3 Tony Stark, I'm going to build the shield that guards the world thing, like, wizard that was like, I'm going to build the shield so great that the world is protected.
Between appreciating a lesson and fully embracing the lesson is sometimes you just needed to learn the thing and you need to let it go, but you grabbed it and you held it.
Yeah. It's like, it's that I can't know what's coming, but I know something is. I don't have proof of what that is, but I know it's something. And therefore I have to build for it. Like, that tells me that what this tower they were building was like an armory of, like, magical power, that they were building this with that sort of grand idea of, I am going to be the protector of the world.
God, what if they saw, like, some massive blast, some huge amount of arcane send off, and they were like, no, what we need then is we need a repository, something that'll suck the energy in and contain it. I just need to build a giant battery that's just constantly pulling in charge, and then no power will accumulate like that. Completely ignoring the self-fulfilling prophecy of if you build a battery that is accumulating charge, it'll be full of charge eventually.
And if it keeps accumulating, it'll be the very thing that you. I like this. This is good. This tells me that gives me a really immediate hook for like what might draw someone to this space. And this is something that I can dangle in front of a ROM is like, that there's a repository of, and I mean, also that ties in so perfect. There's a great parallel between character and monster there of like, we were both drawn to this magical repository. I just got here first and absorbed it all is a pretty good character beat motivation.
Jeff, give me the sadness. I want the last thing on our list to be the people he left behind. I want to leave sad.
Hey, Dylan, remember when earlier we flipped a card and it was the thing that we had talked about for the last 5 minutes?
Yeah.
A misstep in your adventuring days cost you dearly. What happened and what were the consequences? Do you have a thought? Because I have a proposal.
Let's hear the proposal. I have a half-formed thought, so I might counter-offer you.
My immediate thought was, this is a repository. Like so much of this, and I'm leaning into the crystal aesthetic because that informs why the forest around them turned into crystal. If these crystals were batteries, then there's the obvious answer of like, once they were charged, it came time to weapon. Like they were like, well, then we can weaponize them and we can help people defend. Like we can turn them into tools and weapons so that people can use them to defend against what's coming. And it turns out that tapping into a highly charged object full of profoundly unpredictable energy,
trying to fill a water balloon with a fire hose,
just don't work so well when you're just like, I'm just gonna hit this with I'm gonna hit this like heavily charged object with a pickaxe to try and get the power. Things start to explode.
So I like that. What I'm going to say is, my thought was, as far as what could go wrong in the adventuring days, you go out and you adventure like in between sort of experiments. So one of those instances where the only thing you have on you is you're carrying around a spell book, slinging spells, the fighter is nearby, you've got your archer out to the side of the road. One of those things where in a split second gesture, one of their companions was in danger and they held out the book to basically just catch an arrow. It's not until they get back that they realize like everything was fine. They finish a huge amount of construction. They know they've got everything figured out. They finally went through everything. And when they get to that last page, which is supposed to be the vent, the thing that prevents pressure from hitting, that's the tear. That page is wrecked and they have bits of information. They can't quite put it back together because you can't just do like a quick little mending spell on magical information. You can't magic. It's just recursive. It's bad. So one of those things where part of that whole idea of creating these sub batteries is, until I figure out how to safely ambiently vent this, I just need to make a bunch of tiny towers that I can keep filling and keep off to the side until you have this wine cellar full of nuclear weapons. Where you're just like, I just have to keep filling them, because if I don't, this will be full and that will be bad.
Yep. That's great. That rips. That's great. I love that it was just straight up like, we didn't have the ability to filter off this energy, so it just stockpiled in this one place, which if you happen to be like a dimension hopping magic absorbing insectoid creature, you're going to spot that stockpile six planes away, and before you know it, you've accumulated enough power to become divine and become a divine entity, consuming this power yourself, and therefore be powerful enough to consume the world. Fuck. Okay. Our final question, and this I'm gonna the card is great. I'm excited. And I'm going to throw an added question at you.
Okay.
You will always remember your childhood best friend. Who were they? How did they come to be friends? And the added question of where this character slots in, what are they looking for that they need to send someone to the remnants of this tower?
What if this is the person they saved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the part of the whole, like, you loop objects back onto objects, right?
Yeah.
That book was something where, like, hey, for your first major grimoire, for your big notebook, for your experiments, I went out, I got this bound for you. It is this beautiful, like, pristine, leather worked thing with a little sort of slot on it to keep that crystal in.
Mm.
Just like, so the front cover is leather and then a little bit of gold just sticking out maybe half an inch to just hold that sliver of glass in it.
Yeah, I like that.
It's one of those things where the old friend is just like, you know what? He did all of this trying to protect people. It went wrong because he protected me. And there is nothing we can do to fix it, but I can have that thing to remember the person who saved my life. I can't tell anybody why, because if you tell them, yeah, I have very pleasant memories of the man who completely obliterated your home.
Yeah.
It don't take that well.
And I love that, especially because that is such a good, there is such a good twist reveal in that. If the job that is taken is there is a book of spells in that tower that needs to be stolen or needs to be reclaimed, right? Like needs to be taken.
Yeah.
And then the ultimate, like, then there's all of these like thoughts about like, why are they after this thing? You get this whole story of this wizard, was obsessed with building weapons and batteries and, stockpiling this kind of magical energy in case of a disaster. You get all of these stories that it then makes that beat of, no, I wanted the book back because they were my friend. And this was I gave that to them as a gift and I want to remember them, is like a really nice closing beat that's going to land really, 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 really beautifully at the end of the story.
I also always love that, like, little flip of, you just went through all this effort. Okay, what powerful magical artifact you? No, I told you it's a book.
Yeah, it's a book. I just want a book to remember my friend.
It's made of book parts. It has pages and things. You're familiar? It's not magic. God, did you not look at it?
That's great. I love that. I really, really enjoy that. Oh yeah, and like there's no actual magic in the book. It's very specifically like
his research notes.
It's an engineering book.
Yeah, it's the level of magic where, like, yeah, there's magic in it. If you've got fucking millions of gold and like a decade and a half to put in the effort.
Yeah, it's more about like thermodynamics and heat displacement than anything casting related.
Yeah.
That's great. And so that is game, and that is also game. Like that is double game. We got 2 games in today. Both of them ruled. I'm so happy with this. Dylan, thank you so much for joining me on the show. This was really, really fun.
Oh God, I had a great time. I'm always a little bit nervous with things this open-ended, but I'm very pleased with how this turned out.
I'm so happy with everything that we created. I think this is going to tell like a really wonderful little self-contained adventure story that I think is going to be sick.
I'm very excited to see how it plays.
So real quick, before we wrap up, where can people find you and your work online?
So you can find my work in 3 major places. You can find my podcast at Kill Every Monster, wherever good podcasts are found. I know you know where to find them because you're listening to this one. You can find me on Twitter, assuming, implosion.
Assuming it exists.
At DJ Malenfant. I recently found out I have to make this clarification. My middle name's Jacob. I am not and never was a DJ. I was just...
I'll be honest, I appreciate that clarification. It didn't occur to me that was a middle name until this moment, but also I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, okay, neat.
Yeah.
I get.
And
what
also,
a fun
now
thing
you
to know
have
about
all
Dylan.
that information. You can throw all of it into Google Scholar, and I'm a physicist. You can read my paper and cite me, and then I'll seem more important, and it might help me get jobs.
Well, damn. I mean, that is if ever there was a good, strong call to action on an episode, that's the one.
Read some science.
Dylan, thank you so much for doing the show. This kicked ass.
Thank you for having me.
I've
mentioned this before, Jeff, but you've been a fixture in the RPG podcast space. The time that I have been listening to podcasts, it feels very cool to be a part of this.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to have you on the show. This was such a goddamn delight. And for now, I'm going to throw it over to me in the future so that he can wrap up with the show. Take a future me. Thanks, past me, and thanks again to Dylan for coming onto the show. I had so much fun making these weird monsters and this sort of like blighted landscape and this cool little fantasy scenario. Making all of this was a delight, and it really set up a really joyful session running this through with Aram that I really hope that you go and check out either on the feed when it drops tomorrow or at patreon.com/JeffStormer. This game was amazing. I had such a blast with it. Thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to head to the show notes to pick up your own copy of Exquisite Biome and to check out the Kill Every Monster podcast. Like I said, it is genuinely one of my favorite tabletop podcasts. And for me to say that about a Dungeons & Dragons-centric podcast, I feel like says a lot. Anyway, also be sure to follow Dylan on Twitter, fucking as long as that's a thing, or on any other platform at DJ Malenfant. Then while you're on Twitter, follow us at Party of One Pod. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Party of One Podcast. Find us on TikTok at Party of One Podcast. Find us on Tumblr at Party of One Pod. Subscribe to our newsletter at buttondown.email/Party of One Podcast. And join our Discord community at bit.ly/Party of One Discord. If you enjoy the show, there's a lot of ways to support it. You can support us financially at patreon.com/JeffStormer or ko-fi.com/JeffStormer. You can give us a nice iTunes review, shout us out to a friend, give us some love on social media. You can buy some Party of One merch at bit.ly/Party of One merch. Or if you're looking for more great podcast content, you can check out All My Fantasy Children, which is a character creation, storytelling, and world building podcast that I make with my best friend in the world, Aaron Catano Saez. We take a listener submitted prompt and spin it into an original fantasy character, populating a shared universe one story at a time. You can also check out Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast, which is an actual play about a heartless witch, a cozy house, and the many people making their homes inside. Both of those you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Party of One is, as always, produced and edited by Jeff Stormer and Jen Frank. Music for the show comes from the song Infinite Lives by Mega Ran featuring the D&D Sluggers, and the Party of One logo is by Evan Rowland. If you'd like to inquire about advertising rates, coming on the show as a guest, or about press coverage of the show, you can email me at partyofonepodcast@gmail.com. And unless I am mistaken, that is all we do here. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. Remember to fight the forces of fascism every single day. Remember that self-love and self-care are radical and defiant acts of resistance. And as always, party on, everybody.